swim baits. Everybody loves to fish swim baits, whether it's a big swim bait or a little swim bait. And if you didn't know already, you can make your own swim baits at home on the cheap. We can make them in bulk on the cheap as well. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. In today's video, we're going to be making swim baits using the dual mold slick shiner mold. This slick shiner mold makes awesome swim baits, and we're going to be able to make them in bulk because it's an 8 cavity mold. It's a vertical pour mold as well, so you're going to be able to make great laminates, which is what we're going to be doing today. If you don't know what laminates are 2 color baits. So in today's video, we're going to have one color on top and another color on bottom. In order to make these swim baits, we're going to need a few different items. We're going to need some flake, we're going to need some plastisol, we're going to need some colorant, and we're going to need a dual injector. The dual injector is the most important part for making these laminate baits. That dual injector is going to allow you to inject 2 different colors at the same time. It goes into a blending block, which then puts those 2 colors into the mold. And we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper as we start making these baits. So let's get started. When we're making laminates, we definitely need to make sure we have 2 different measuring cups, because one color is going to go in one of the measuring cups and the other color is going to go in the second measuring cup. So for this video, I'm going to be pouring just under 1 cup of plastisol into each of the cups. We're going to add some salt, and that takes a little bit of space, so I want to leave room for some salt. So guys, before we get too far into the video, I want to talk about Waterland Fishing Optics. Waterland is a sunglasses sponsor of mine. They make awesome polarized sunglasses for fishing. They have glass and polycarbonate lenses. This is the Ashore frame in the Golden Light Mirror. The Golden Light Mirror is a great lens for low light conditions, whether it's cloudy or just a little bit early in the morning. The Ashore frame is also a great one to wear on the water because it gives you a little bit more coverage on the side than some of the other frame options out there. If you're interested in checking out all their products, make sure to go to waterlandco.com and use my discount code if you buy anything. My discount code is LUNA15. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put our plastisol into our microwave to warm up the plastisol. You want to get up to 350 degrees, and you want to take your time getting this plastisol heated up. Something that's super important when it comes to heating up your plastisol is take it slow. What I like to do is usually start off with 1 minute intervals. I take them out, I stir it up, put it back in there for a minute. Once I start to see the consistency of my plastisol change up, then I'll slow it down and go 30-second intervals. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that we're going to be able to make these in bulk and we're going to be able to make them on the cheap. The reason why I said that is because we are using the Dual Molds Essential Series molds. This mold is cheaper to make, cheaper to manufacture, so that cost savings goes on to you guys. This mold is an 8 cavity mold, which is a high cavity count for a lot of molds out on the market, and it only comes in around $90. $90 might sound expensive to some of you guys, but a mold that makes 8 baits at one time, a lot of times are going to be north of 300 bucks. If you're thinking about starting the tackle making hobby, check out the soft plastic bait making kits that Dual Molds offers. They have a couple different versions of those kits, so that way you can get started as cheaply as possible. Real quick, one thing I want to talk to you guys about is the dual injector. This is a dual injector right here, this contraption, and the dual injector is what you need in order to make these 2 color baits. What ends up happening is you draw up your plastisol into the injector, and then you're going to put it into this blending block, which is this piece down here. Once you push all that plastic out, it comes out the nozzle at the bottom, and it goes into that mold, and one color's on top of the other. They don't mix a ton unless you screw something up and your consistencies are all messed up. There are some nuances that we'll talk about as we're pouring these, but the dual injector is what you need in order to make 2 color or laminate baits. All right, so our plastisol is nice and warm. You want to make sure your plastisol gets up to 350 degrees or else it just stays a nasty gooey mess. So you got to get to 350 degrees or else it doesn't solidify correctly. The next step in the process is putting salt into our baits or into our cups. Then I'm going to pour an 1/8 cup of salt into my measuring cups, which is half of this 1/4 cup measuring cup. So that's about half right there. Then we're going to add the rest into this one. The salt does cool down your plastisol, so we will need to reheat it before we start adding in all of our colorant. So when you're working with salt inside of your baits, you got to keep stirring it constantly. That salt always sinks to the bottom of your cups. So in order to get that salt all the way throughout from top to bottom, you got to stir it a lot. So our plastisol is hot enough right now. So what we're going to do is add in our first color. What we're going for is an electric shad color. So we're gonna have like a green pumpkin black flake top with a translucent silver with like a little bit of a blue pearl on the bottom. I hope I don't screw it up with that blue pearl. Sometimes your pearl powders kind of make things a little bit more opaque than what you're going for. So we're gonna have to be very careful with that. This first color that we're gonna be using is Green Pumpkin Green X2 Colorant from Do It Molds. I'm just gonna add in 3 or 4 drops to it and just see how that goes. I don't want this to be too dark on the top, but I definitely need that color to come through. Sometimes when you're doing laminate baits, having everything too clear doesn't give you enough contrast, and your baits end up kind of blending together and you don't have a real clear line of separation between the two colors. So all told, we probably have 8 total drops of Green Pumpkin Green X2 colorant in there, and it's definitely starting to give us our green pumpkin color that we're going for. Still fairly translucent, so I think I'll be able to make that work. Now for our bottom color, I'm gonna go with Do It Molds Blue Pearl Powder, and it's just gonna be a tiny, tiny bit. A little goes a long way when you're dealing with pearl powder. All I want it to do is just to give it a little bit of a blue pearl hue when the sunlight hits it the way it needs to hit it to give it that hue. It just kind of gives it a little bit more of a lifelike presentation when it's in that water. And then what we're also gonna do is add in a little bit of silver flake. This is tiny, tiny flake, 08, and I want, once again, very, very little flake, just so it shimmers in the water and gives me a little bit of contrast against my green. All right, and the last thing that we're gonna add in here is a little bit of black flake. This is 015 black flake, not very much. Again, this is only 1 cup measuring cup, so you don't need a ton of flake, but I do want that flake to shine through the bait to give it that contrast that I'm going for with my bottom color. That looks pretty good. I don't want a ton, I just want a little bit. So what I'm gonna do now is set up my mold and get my clamps put on. You wanna put your clamps on nice and tight in order to get good seal around all your baits. When you're making laminate baits, you also want to pay attention to what the top and the bottom is of your cavity. So if you're looking at one of these cavities, the top side of where this mold sits right here, which is the furthest away from the camera, is going to be my top side. So that's where my green color needs to come out of my blending block, and then my white or my silver or clear color is going to be on the bottom, which is going to be on the closest side to the camera. That's important on these ones because there is a distinct top and bottom. If your bait that you're making has no distinct top or bottom, it's not as big of a deal. One thing when you're clamping your mold is you want to make sure that your clamps evenly spread out the pressure on your mold itself. You don't want everything to be up high on the mold. You don't want them both on the bottom part of the mold, because sometimes that can create a little bit of gap on the opposite side of the mold. So I like to stagger mine, where I have one that's a little bit low, one that's a little bit higher, or right in the middle on each side of the mold, and that gives you the best closure and the least likelihood of flashing. All right, so our first round of baits I think is ready to go. Our plastisol is nice and warm. You want to make sure you stir everything before you suck it up into the injector. And I like to position my measuring cups how I'm going to go into my blending block. So the green on top and the clear and white on the bottom. I like to check for flow. I got good flow coming out of my injectors. Now we're going to come over to our blending block. You got to go even pressure down. I like to hold that pressure down so that way I get a nice full complete bait. Top off that sprue, which is key. And then on this one I'm going to skip the next one. Even pressure down. And when everything's cold, a lot of times it makes your baits set up a lot faster. Sometimes your mold's cold and your injectors are cold, and it just makes it a lot harder to work with, and everything starts to set up a little bit faster. Cools down that plastisol, makes it a little bit harder to get all the complete baits. So sometimes when it's still a little bit cold like that, I'll skip each one so that way I don't have a bunch of buildup over one cavity. And if everything's going good, I will go back to where I started and see if I can get another bait out of it. Things are setting up pretty tough right now, so that's the last one I'm going to do. When you're doing laminate baits, which is the 2-color baits like we're doing in this video, you want to make sure that the consistency of your 2 different colors is as similar as possible. If you have one that's a lot more runny and another that's really thick, then you're going to end up having issues trying to get those to come together. One usually overpowers the other, and a lot of times that runnier color ends up blending into that thicker color, and it's really hard to try to get those lines to line up just how you're looking for to get that nice crisp separation. All right, I think our baits are ready to come out of the mold. So we're gonna open everything up, and I think they turned out pretty good. It's probably not coming through great on camera, but this one turned out well. This one turned out well, and the first one turned out well. The last two that I did where I thought that the plastisol started to kind of stiffen up are the ones that didn't turn out very well, but when it was a little bit warmer, those ones turned out well and we got a good laminate. So a tip when you're doing the laminates with this slick shiner mold is you want to run it a little bit hotter than you normally would with a CNC mold. I find that when I'm making baits with these Essential Series molds, I get better quality, better looking baits when I run the plastisol a little bit hotter than I do with the CNCs. Now, when you're doing the laminates, sometimes you want to do them a little bit cooler, so you're gonna have to find that happy medium between the two. But as I did baits in this video, running it a little bit hotter got me better laminates and better looking baits. So the plastisol this go around is a little bit hotter than last time. So I'm hoping that we'll get a few more baits, and I'm hoping that those laminates turn out a little bit better. I don't think my colors are super dark, so that's why I don't think that laminate's showing through as well on camera, and it's not as distinct. In person, it's probably a little bit better, but we're gonna see how these go. I think these are definitely good looking baits, and I think they're definitely gonna catch fish, and it's mimicking exactly what I was going for. I just think that with the translucent top and a little bit of a translucent bottom, they're just not coming through as well as they would if the colors were a little bit more contrasted from each other. The more contrast you have in your colors, the better the baits turn out overall when you're doing laminates. The more translucent they are, the more likely they are to bleed, and the more likely the darker color ends up tinting the lighter color. So yeah, this is a lot hotter this go around. We'll definitely be able to get 5, 6, 7 baits maybe out of this one injection round. And this is exactly why I say you can make them in bulk, because you have a lot of cavities and these baits are getting hammered out real fast. In no time at all, we have almost 10 baits. Now, quick tip when it comes to the actual dual injector. When you set up your dual injector, I like to have it set up exactly like you see here, where this bar is all the way up towards my knobs right here. And when you pull it up, I like to pull from the middle, so that way I get nice even suction up into my injector. And then when you push everything back down, you get that same even flow out of both sides. Sometimes if you pull from one side, things don't evenly come up into the injector. And same thing when you push unevenly, sometimes one color comes out more and then your laminates don't look good. All right, time to take off our clamps and check out this last run of baits. So this set of them turned out really good. This one's good, 2, 3, 4 of them are real good. On the other side, this final one turned out pretty good as well. And the other two didn't turn out that good. That's the one thing about laminates, is you never know exactly how they're all gonna turn out. Just the angle of your dual injector going in there, the angle of your blending block, it makes such a big difference. But overall, we got a bunch of baits that are definitely worth putting on that jig head. I think this color swim bait is something that we all should have in our arsenals pretty much all the time, because it's super versatile. As you can see, this slick shiner mold makes awesome swim baits. They're gonna be fish catchers, guys. This is a 3.5 inch bait, so it's good for pretty much anywhere in the country. There's always bait fish that size pretty much everywhere. If I got it out here, you definitely got it where you're at. My bait fish are super small a lot of the time, but they will eat that 3.5 inch slick shiner. Guys, don't forget to check out the product list that's down in the description of today's video, along with my Do It Molds affiliate link. If you're gonna go to the Do It Molds website and buy anything, make sure to use that link so that way they know that I sent you and I can get credit for any of those sales. And guys, if you wanna watch any more tackle making videos, make sure to click on the playlist that's on the screen right now.